Hello and welcome to StayEnergetik, a podcast dedicated to our favourite Belarusian football team, the mighty Energetik BGU. Thank you so much for joining us on our weekly journey through the main talking points of Energetik's last match. Once we've covered that, we'll move on to our thoughts on how we see the next one panning out, and anything else Energetik related that we think you might want to hear. Привет, я Liam.
And I'm Dan.
And without further ado, we will move on to discuss the events of last weekend. In fact, I kind of felt like I wanted to start with the weekend before, when we were very much the centre of attention, as we commented at the time. We had the TV studio and everything. We had Oleg Dulub, the older guy in the check shirt. Thank you very much to Jacob Barnes for supplying us with that information. A previous coach of Bate, apparently. So we were very much the stars of the show for that weekend. This weekend, by comparison, we were very much on the undercard. We were the first match up on the Sunday afternoon. It all felt a little bit underwhelming by comparison, and unfortunately, Dan, it ended up being a rather underwhelming afternoon for our boys as well.
Underwhelming, frustrating, depressing. There are many words for what I was feeling on Sunday. A little bit more tempered now, and I'm sure we'll go into that. But yeah, it didn't feel good at all, did it?
No, it was a pretty miserable feeling at the final whistle, wasn't it? And yet it could all have been so different. Certainly, looking back at the first point that comes to mind, the first real key talkie point that comes to mind, it was when Tway hit the bar. And shortly afterwards, we also had a disallowed goal, which I think we both felt, and obviously further analysis has suggested it was an incredibly marginal offside decision against Jucic.
Yeah, and I know we'll go into the other one a little bit later, but the first time that Tway hit the bar. So it's not as if there was a one-off either. And the goal, yeah. I mean, I don't think any of us were really kind of that happy about it at the time. The camera... I know we say this every week about something. It's normally about a penalty shout, but the camera angles aren't as generous, perhaps, as we're used to in the Premier League or even some of the lower leagues here, I think. But a lot of work done. By a little shout out to Noah. I've forgotten his Twitter handle. I apologise, mate. Who spent quite a lot of time trying to re-establish the images and put lines in and try and work out if it was or wasn't. And the one thing we can say for definite is, whichever way it was close.
My initial feeling was just simply that the ball into the box obviously did go forward, but I felt that the time it took for the ball to get across the penalty area, Jucic then arrived on cue just ahead of the defender. I felt he had to have started his run behind the defender because he was only just ahead of the defender, and he clearly did make a run and muscled his way sort of beyond the defender to get the ball in the net. So my first reaction was certainly that it was okay. Clearly, the assistant referee had a much better view than me, especially as we, as you say, were relying on TV pictures, which weren't perhaps definitive, shall we say, in terms of establishing what had actually happened. But yes, I mean, two decisions there, two very, very close calls. The thickness of a crossbar and then the thickness of a cigarette paper, I would suggest, for the offside. And we arrived at half-time all square. And I do feel, Dan, that certainly had either of those gone in, I felt all along before the game, during the game, until we went behind, I felt that if we scored first, we were going to win this game. I was absolutely sure of that. I felt that Belshina lacked confidence, obviously, because of the start they've had to the season. And I felt the heads would go down and we would win. If not comfortably, at least we would certainly win. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be. And then straight after half-time, we got a bit of a nasty shock, didn't we?
Yeah. Just before we go into the second half, there wasn't the only opportunities. I mean, the AK had a header. And I've mentioned a few times, but for a few millimetres, this could be a very different. But actually, just even expanding it out just a few centimetres. Is it worth talking very briefly? We're about to talk about the moment that actually hurt us. We did have a bit of a warning on about the 20th minute. And it's my little bugbear that is becoming an ever bigger problem for me, which is the movement of the defence. we seem to be drawn to the ball like proverbial flies to the honey or something. It is crazy. I'll just very briefly go through this one because this kind of sums up something I think I've seen in every single game that we have played. We had 4 defenders back, or 4 players out of the 5 back. Gers was down the other end because he'd been doing his attacking duties on the right. But we had 4 players back. There was 3 or 4 of them coming in. I think 3 and the 4th one joining. 3 of our players went out to the ball. 1 player stays back. And just moments before they play the killer ball straight to him so he can have a shot, he also runs to join the other 3. And that is something that is becoming an ever-increasing bugbear for me. But yeah, that was the warning. That was a little kind of, hey, you might want to pay a bit of attention here because they could do you a bit of damage and play on your weakness. But yeah, we played another 25 minutes after that. Everything was fine. We go through halftime and then it hurts, doesn't it?
It does very much, and I suppose even then, even before we mention the goal that we conceded, literally in 15 seconds of the restart, Jucic had another chance or another effort, shall we say, from about 20 yards that I think the keeper probably had cover, but it's still only probably a foot wide of the post. And you're thinking, this is we're starting again. Playing as well as we were for some of the first half at least, and then we're going to push on again. And then literally a minute later, we concede. And again, it seems like a little bit of defensive naivety, and part of that defensive naivety is undoubtedly to do with the changes. I think we agree, don't we, Dan? Unfortunately, we did have to make some changes at half time. We had to make a call as to who was going to play right wing back. And for me, we made the wrong call, and we paid for it.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to single Jucic out necessarily. I'm not entirely sure this is his fault where he's playing, but he goes from on the 45th minute having this shot that just goes to the keeper's left, marginally wide, to suddenly being the man who should be there defending the ball that comes in. You know, he within a minute, he's from one end to the other. So perhaps he was just a bit knackered, to be perfectly honest with you. He's had to run back. He's had to get back in place. Maybe he shouldn't have been up front if he's supposed to have been kind of hanging back. But as we said with the earlier warning, Gers is supposed to be back there, and he was right down the front either. So it's not exactly a positional, you know, it's not something where people positionally are cemented to a particular area in this team. It was frustrating. And I have to say fair credit to, I hate the fact I even learned his name because I try not to. But fair play to Koval. He had a good game overall. And he was just there. He jumped up, headed it in. It was far, far too easy.
I think the difficulty for us was that obviously we knew we had to make some changes at halftime. Difficult situation to be in. Clearly, Miroshnikov was injured, and I can't imagine why else he would have been withdrawn at halftime. So then we're faced with this decision to try and find somebody else to play centre half. Nosko got the nod there and came to be the third centre half. And then the decision was made to switch gears into midfield, presumably because they felt he was a better midfielder than Jucic, and Jucic having played at right wing back a couple of times before. I have to say, without really pulling up any trees in that position, was given the nod there. And I just felt that, I mean, I've defended very badly many set pieces and many corners in my life as a footballer, and no matter how much you're told what to do, if it's not instinctive to you to close down the man or to anticipate the ball into the box, you just don't do it. And that's what it looked like to me with Jucic. He's literally frozen. Ball comes into the box. He's ball watching. He reacts a yard too late, and Koval's a free header. And as you say, we don't want to pick on Jucic and say it's all his fault. It's symptomatic of a problem that we have, I think, giving away what I would consider to be quite soft goals. It's a beautiful move, to be fair, from Belshina that takes them into our box from the halfway line. But the ball into the box could have been defended better. Similarly, the ball to Koval in the first half could have been defended better. We had plenty of players in both situations in the correct sort of areas, and we just didn't deal with it. And then obviously we were left with a bit of an uphill struggle after that. But again, we could even after that, we did hit the bar again, didn't we? With an effort from Tway from a free kick that was millimetres away from pulling us level. With still half an hour to go.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned to you the other day, but I think Tway definitely was my man of the match as far as the Energetik players. I think this is the best performance he's had definitely recently. full of energy, full of drive. So much going on, and two opportunities where he hits the bar so I keep coming back to it. Millimeters, we're talking millimeters, and this is a very, very different game. In contrast, I just want to just highlight something here. So I mentioned obviously Tway hitting the post twice, and the second one. Pardon?
The bar.
Sorry, yes, the bar. Sorry, my apologies. So I was gearing up to another point. My words kind of carried on slightly sideways, but so he hits the crossbar twice. This one from a free kick. The other one from the first half, just to dip into this, just to make a point. Beautiful ball forward, looped over from distance. At that point, ahead of the yak were 3 players. And I'm looking at that, and I'm just getting a bit confused by that, because the yak's supposed to be our man up front. I know Judcic was up there as well, but ahead of him were Tway, Mawatu, and I think Gears as well, when the long ball gets played through. And this kind of highlights a slight other thing that I'm starting to get a little bit niggled by now. I mean, don't get me wrong, he had a cracking start to the season, but are we looking at his goal tally actually overshadowing somewhat the performances of a player who, on his moment, can be an amazingly tactile, inspirational player, but we've not really seen a lot of it lately.
I think the biggest problem for me with Yaxi Bear is I'm not really sure he knows what position he's playing in. I get the feeling he's been given a free role. I don't really know whether he is an out-and-out centre forward. I don't get the sense he is. Whenever the ball goes down the flanks, he tends to pull out to the edge of the area. He seems to want to have the ball sort of pulled back to him, so he can perhaps just get a yard and get a shot in. He doesn't really attack the 6-yard box. Is he a winger? Is he a number 10? Is he? He's not. For me, he's not an out-and-out forward. And I wonder whether in himself that's part of the frustration. And we see it coming out in his game. And I think Sunday was a classic example when he's not going for him. I know he's only young, but he just, his body language is awful. He just gives the impression that the world is against him. He gets muscled off the ball quite easily on occasion. His response to that usually is to foul the opposition and then look baleful at the fact that he's basically been hard done by. I don't think we're getting the best out of him at the moment. I think that's the big problem we have with him. But even after that, we had Haikon off the bench, had a great chance, which was really well saved. But then obviously in the play which followed that, the ball into the box from Muatu, horrible injury. And then on top of everything else, we'd used all our substitutions. So we were down to 10 men for the last 20 minutes. And it just seemed like, at that point, I was thinking to myself, it just isn't going to be our day here. And so it proved, unfortunately, the last 20 minutes was just, the ball would not fall for us in any way, shape or form in the box.
Yeah, and that did look like quite a nasty incident. It's one of those weird ones. Both players are playing for the ball. I mean, he's trying to get momentum on it to get the header directed towards goal, etc. And he just carries that motion through to smack into the back of the guy's head, I think it was. I mean, since then he has posted out. I reached out to him and he responded quite quickly, saying he was fine. And he's in a bit of a jovial mood. Yesterday he was joking about how his Face ID is not working on his iPhone and whatnot. So, he's clearly in good spirits. But, it didn't look good. I mean, he looked out of it, completely out of it. There was a point he was being held up by one of the other players. I can't remember who it was, but he had no kind of control over his ability to sit up even. We saw him leave in an ambulance, unfortunately, which always puts a bit of a scare in you. Again, that just kind of deflated us somewhat. I actually thought Hake looked quite good when he came on. Not just the shot. I mean, the keeper did well to come out and kind of smother that, but I thought he added something in the midfield that we were definitely lacking on the day. And it's really unfortunate. Well, doubly unfortunate. He doesn't get the goal, at least for his injury. If he scores and goes off with a bit of an injury, I'm sure he'd be a lot happier with it. But it just really deflated. And as you say, we're down to 10 men then for that, with over 20 minutes left to go. And just nothing worked after that. really. I was watching back through the highlights and looking back through my notes of the game, and I don't have a single thing written down after the clash of heads, other than final whistle. That last 20 minutes, we might as well have just stopped the game there. Nothing happened.
No, I mean, I suppose we have to give Belshina credit in the sense that they clearly were buoyed by that. You know, they saw the finishing line in sight for their first victory of the season, their first clean sheet of the season, which was doubly galling, I felt. But fair play to them. They did defend well at the end and ran the clock down quite effectively. And I think all we can say at the end of it is it's crucial. We just move on quickly, isn't it? That we forget about it, that we don't get too upset about it. I'm not talking about me and you, Dan. I'm talking about the players. Although I think we've just about moved on by a couple of days later. But no, we need to forget about it and put it behind us, because we've got a massive game this weekend, what we would like to call a Minsk derby against Dinamo, who are fast improving. I don't know how you see this. I mean, my first thought with this is that one of our biggest advantages in this game is that both the supporters and the players of Dinamo Minsk, I think, are slightly dismissive of us. And I think in a sense that might play into our hands. They might actually underestimate us. I think that they're only 3 points behind us, and they would expect to beat us and thus on the head-to-head move ahead of us. And that might just work in our favour. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, you'll be aware I've been deliberately trying to create a rivalry with Dinamo Minsk. My feelings, my heart was warmed the other day when they referred to us in a tweet as their rivals. So I feel like I've had progress on my little rivalry challenge. Yeah, how do we move? I'm going to give. I mentioned this before we started recording, but the perspective of that game in my mind has changed. So I came off the bat, and I said to you even during it and after it, I just got to a point where I was extremely frustrated with the entire thing. That last 20 minutes, I was getting more and more depressed, as I sometimes do when just everything feels like it's going against you. With a bit of time, actually, I look back and I think I'm looking at hit the bar. I'm looking disallowed goal. I'm looking at hit the bar, narrowly to the left, narrowly to the right. I can see 5 opportunities that, but for a few centimeters, or in some cases millimeters, we don't lose that game. And as you said, if we'd have got the first goal, if that early one with Tway, if he'd have got that first goal, would Belshina have been able to come back at us? Would they have had the confidence? Would it have damaged them? So I think it's possible. And I just want to, sorry, I'm going to go slightly sideways, a little pet peeve of mine. People on Facebook, just straight away this week, the comments of, oh, this is clearly a team just throwing it away. It's fixed. It's all this thing. If you watched the game, if you even watched the highlights, this wasn't a team that just gave up the rest of it. It was marginal. And a player smashed his face in to try and help with this. It's not exactly as a team who's going to try and throw the game at all. So that's my little pet peeve, just as the Facebook admin. I'll take that hat off and I'll move back onto what we're talking about. Next week, will they be overconfident? Almost certainly, I think, especially looking at what we did on Sunday, especially looking at us losing to the team that were bottom of the league, etc. They probably can't help but feel confident. Possibly a little bit what we felt against Belshina even will probably come into their mind. I still think we've got the ability to do them damage. I do think there's an interesting question there as to whether maybe the Yak needs a bit of a rest. And yeah, I think on our day, we're still a team that can challenge anyone. I think we've shown that earlier on in the season.
I think the size of the pitch and the quality of the surface will help us as well. Well, I think it'll help us more than hinder us. I mean, I do worry at times that a big pitch, when I think about this game, a big pitch might help them, given what we've just discussed about our defence. Might leave some holes, but I do think that we will be well served by a good surface, and it's a bit of a, even though the ground's not like to have many people in it. It is certainly a ground that feels like a ground, a really big-time ground, doesn't it? It's a massive stadium and a massive playing surface, and I hope that we'll rise to that. And as you say, rather than feeling too depressed about last weekend, remind ourselves that we did very nearly beat them in some ways. We had the chances. We probably didn't deserve to win the game, but I would argue we didn't deserve to lose it either. And put that behind us, and bearing in mind that Dinamo beat them the week before 4-0, I believe, surely they'd be thinking, well, they lost to them last week at home, we beat them 4-0 away. We must be fairly confident of winning this game. And also, as well, they've only lost 1 in 5. Dinamo now, and we've not won in 3. So that's something else to think about and think, well, surely we're going to win this game. I suppose perhaps the biggest thing working against us at the moment, from my perspective, is where are we at with injuries? We talk about resting the Yak possibly, which is certainly a strong argument for that. But there was no sign of Bakic last weekend. Roshnikov has gone off at half-time. Status unknown for this weekend. We've also got, obviously, Sokol, who's missed several weeks now. He's another centre-half. We have got a small squad. Obviously, Hike won't be involved this weekend either. Are we in a situation here where we really aren't even able to put out anything like our first choice 11 in a match that I think we can win if we do, or if we could?
Yeah, and I think this is always going to be a challenge for a small squad. How far does our depth go? I mean, we're already talking about what you just listed, about 4 or 5 players possibly who aren't going to be available, or probably aren't going to be available. It starts to become a bigger issue. I'm hopeful that maybe a couple of those will be on their way back. There's a bit of lack of clarity necessarily as to the damage in the Belarusian league, as to how long. We're so used to being able to know, oh, that's so-and-so, they're going to be out for this, or, we just don't get any of that. It just suddenly a player's not available, and you're like, oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, depth of the squad is perhaps are going to be our biggest weakness throughout, even if we kind of get over this. And there's always going to be a risk that we're just 1 or 2 players away from really struggling to put out a squad that can do what we know, can hit the heights that we know they are possible and have shown previously in the season they can do. So, yeah, that is definitely up there on my list of concerns, probably just underneath the ability of the defence to go completely missing and chase the ball. I know I've mentioned that a few times, but it's really bugging me now.
I think to me, the one key question is, and we've referred to this already in terms of getting over last weekend, do we still believe as a squad in ourselves to capitalise on this excellent start we've given ourselves to this season? Nobody would expect us to be where we are. We are reaching the halfway point of the season. We're still in the top 6. We're still very much within touching distance of the leaders, for goodness sake. And that is remarkable. But we haven't won now for 3 games. And we would have expected to get more than 1 point from those 3 games. I'm absolutely sure of that. Can we go again? We did before. We lost 3 in a row. We didn't score a goal. We turned that round and won 4 games in a row after that. Can we put this performance behind us last weekend, which wasn't that terrible, but was ultimately very disappointing in terms of the outcome? Can we go again? And because I think this is a game that we really, really can show our true fighting spirit, and we can show that we're not a flash in the pan side. I don't think Dinamo are amazing. I don't think they are a side that are going to absolutely pummel us into submission. I think they're a big side and they're a physical side, and I think that's always a worry with our side. I think there are a few in there who do get muscled off the ball rather too easily, but I think in terms of playing ability, I think we have the weapons to hurt them if we can put out anything like our best 11. Can we make that count? Can we actually turn around another slightly disappointing period and get back to winning ways? Because after that, we've got Slavia at home, which is again a 3rd home game in a row that I would suggest is winnable. But we haven't won the other 2. And then after that, I think we go to Bate. So, this is a crucial time for us. We cannot afford for the next 3 games to get the 1 point that we've got from the last 3 games. We need more than that if we really want to stay in contention for one of those top spaces, and if we still want to keep alive this dream of maybe playing in Europe next year.
Well, if you're promising me that the payoff for losing 3 games is we win the next 4, and that includes beating our rivals, the horrible, horrible Dinamo Minsk, and to do the double over Bate, then if that's your promise to me, Liam, then I'm okay with losing the last 3 games suddenly. I think that'd be a trade-off well worth it. But in all seriousness, this is, we're due to go back round again now, really, aren't we? We're restarting. We're going to see how we, was it a flash in the pan beating Bate, for example? That was a massive surprise at the beginning of the season. I know that drew quite a bit of attention for the club. Is it possible for us to do it twice? I don't know. And that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch, especially the fact that they've started to find a bit of form, even if it didn't quite go for them on Sunday. I'm interested. I'm intrigued. I'm not necessarily confident. I know I'm supposed to be the half glass full guy, but let's just say I can see the fact that it might be half full, but I can also see it's possibly half empty. I'm not entirely sure that fits the metaphors, but that's kind of where I'm at. So yeah, I'm not really looking at it with confidence, but I can see the reasons why we could do something, and I'm going to be hopeful. And I think that's all you can be sometimes. You just got to sit back, hope some of the players come back, hope some of the players who've not quite performed to kick on. Hope that some of the players who've done well, we touched on Tway earlier. I think Mawatu had not a bad game, actually. Gears has started to come on really strongly lately. There is some real promise, actually, even at a point where the club's not quite doing well, with some of the players really starting to come out of themselves and contribute something. So I'm going to latch onto that. I'm going to put my faith in that and kind of see where we end up, I guess.
Bless you, Dan. You still think we lost against Vitebsk, don't you? It's that draw that felt like a loss.
I'm sorry. Yeah. You are right. You are right. Sorry. Damn it! Does that mean we don't win the next 4 now? Does that mean we? Damn it! I completely threw it. I just can't get out of my head. It just genuinely felt like such a throwaway. Yeah, my apologies. Of course, we didn't lose 3. We haven't won in 3.
This is correct. And to be fair to Vitebsk, they went and beat Rook on Sunday, didn't they? Which wasn't a bad result. I still don't think they're the greatest outfit that has ever graced the Belarusian Premier League. But still, yeah, it did feel like a loss, of course. And maybe that means we can't win the next 4 now. Dan, I tell you what, if we win the next 4, yeah, that would be quite amazing. The double of a Barton, my goodness, that's the stuff of dreams, isn't it? But let's concentrate on this Saturday. We will be on the air again from about 6:15, if all goes to plan. We're looking forward to it. We're, if not quietly optimistic, we're at least looking forward to the game, and we're hopeful. I think perhaps is the best way of putting it, as Dan has already mentioned. So please do join us for that. In the meantime, look after yourselves.
Indeed. Take care.
Thanks again for taking time out of your busy lives to listen to us talk about a team whom we knew nothing not so long ago, but who we now hold dear to our football supporting hearts. Please do contact us with comments and suggestions if you have any. My Twitter handle is @AGameInSpain, and Dan's is @MajorDanB. That's with an A at the end. If, like us, you feel like talking about Energetik most days of the week, or even just at weekends, please do contact Dan, and he will add you to the Energetik Ultras Twitter chat. We'll be back next week, but until then, please do stay energetic. We firmly believe that you won't regret it. Do svidania.